Great. CEO PodSync.
Excellent. All right, so I'll kick it off. Apologies, we were a bit late on the agenda. The first thing I wanted to highlight is that there was a little bit of naming confusion, and we, as group pods, started talking about organizations, but we also have the group workspace, and there's remote development. We've actually aligned on a proposal. Workspace is going to be renamed to organization, and remote development can then use the term workspace for their service offering. This is largely gone through and is pending VP approval. And following that, as far as I understand, this is driven by the group manage workspace group. They'll also rename to manage organize. Just wanted to highlight that because I think names are hard and important, but I think we're largely there.
Thanks for that. I don't see the manage organize. I think organization is quite different from organize.
Okay, I can provide that feedback. I think more context is in the issue. I think that's the current proposal.
I'm looking at the issue. I don't think it considers organization in this trade-off here.
So your proposal is to choose the name manage organization?
Yep.
Okay, I'll record that and I'll
snippets and everything else. It doesn't need to be an active verb like the stage names.
I'll just put that into a comment as some additional feedback. I'll take that action.
Yeah, and I can organize my bedroom doesn't mean my bedroom is an organization. Like there's a weak link between the two.
I think that's correct. Excellent. The next one is from Camille with updates on POCs.
So I think we kind of concluded POC. We got some amount of the features working, some being hacky, some essential features also the work like related to Git stuff, some amount of the coverage of the QA. There is some router POC demo recorded. I think it was like from a few weeks ago, but nothing really fundamentally changed. In general, I think like it shows that like pods architecture is definitely plausible. There's like a ton of different changes that has to be made across product to adapt to that. Maybe Sid or anyone else, do you have like any specific question about the 1B without going into more details?
I think this is helpful, this picture. I think this says cluster metadata, user settings, user sessions. Should we just have a user service? Should we just call it our user service instead of calling it a cluster metadata, which means nobody knows what it is?
It's one of the discussed design proposal. So far, we've been discussing sharing data cluster wide, but there is also the idea that we maybe have something named authentication service, which is primarily responsible for cluster wide stuff, which is like users, sessions, and whatever else fits into this picture. So
what you have, if you have an authentication service, you visit it once to get authenticated, and then you go your merry way. If we're storing user settings here, it sounds like it's something that might be needed later on as well. So then I would call it a user service, not an authentication service.
To be clear, that the proposal didn't evaluate a user's service being independent from GitLab, but instead we evaluated decomposing a user database in Postgres that's accessed directly from all of the pods. So to actually extract a service in the kind of HTTP sense, that would be moving a lot of code outside of the GitLab code base, which we didn't evaluate.
Oh, cool. So it's cluster metadata. It's like, it's data only. It's not code. Cool. Maybe then the smallest thing to change to make it a bit more understandable is to call it user metadata, unless there's a lot of non-user metadata in there too.
I think we don't know yet, because it really depends on the features that we would like to keep cluster versus local, like related to the CI, related to routing, and some other stuff. So it's very likely that a lot of stuff gonna be user, but it's still unclear how much other stuff gonna be there.
Great.
So
then I
we
really
don't
love
know
the
it.
then I really love the current naming, and it's appropriate. Great. Thanks for elaborating. No, then I don't have comments. Thanks for the context.
Excellent. I'll move to point C. So as part of these POCs, what we've essentially were able to establish is outlining a number of impacted features by the pods architecture, and we've added those to the blueprint. It's not a complete list. This is essentially us documenting also for other groups to see specifically, where we see pods actually impacting how certain things work. And we've also already started sort of thinking a little bit on how we could possibly approach some of those impacted features and solve specific problems. But that, I think, is good documentation and part of the discovery process. But we have kind of, I think, gotten to the end of it right now. We've exhausted sort of the easy space. There's a lot more to be done here. Any questions on that? Okay. Then I think Camille can give you a high-level summary of where we are at after all of that work.
I think it appears overall that it's plausible. It's tremendous amount of the work and pretty wide impact. But so far, I think we decided to stop on doing POC to find some better framework to evaluate those trade-offs. Because even from these things that they are enlisted here, there is really a lot of product decision to make, because we would be breaking a lot of assumptions how current GitLab works. Pods basically depend very heavily on strong isolation between organizations. And this is also, I guess, a part of the debate and discussion how organizations should fit and where. A lot of also current functions, or the functions that are being planned, especially around the organization, depend on the current social-like model with sharing data. So this will require fixing them, or changing how we design that, and there's no easy answer to that. So we kind of decided that there is a stop for POC for our analysis of the features, to kind of have some framework to engage with everyone from the company to evaluate those stuff. I added also some side note about something to discuss potential, a potential point to discuss in the future about possible approach that is more like a hybrid, that maybe pods is not meant to solve all problems initially, but it's meant to solve a very specific problem of customers requiring isolation. This is also an aspect that we are evaluating as part of the UX research, but Fabian could talk a little more about that. So Fabian, maybe you are next.
Yeah, so essentially where we are now is, I think we've done POCs, we've established that this is mostly plausible, but because of the impact that this new architecture has on features, some very fundamental to GitLab, like an organization, forking, I think our next steps that we want to take is, and this is a proposal from our end right now, is to say, okay, let's prepare for a combined product and engineering OKR to provide a framework for the impacted groups to explore and validate how GitLab features would work in a pods architecture. We can provide from group pods leading constraints and can say, this is how the architecture works. These are some things that are no longer possible. These are some things that are more expensive than before, for example, via APIs, and some things that remain unchanged. And then work with all the impacted groups to really define the trade-offs and the impacts and possible solutions. That's not something that group pods can do by itself because we're not the domain experts in every single area of GitLab. We've done this already in a similar model with decomposition, where we also didn't know all the details. But I think it will be important to make it a priority for the impacted groups, so that it's clear that this is something we require and that's important, and they can carve out some time, and we can go from there. And the outcome of this would be essentially a pretty good evaluation of what GitLab would look like with pods, if there are any hard blockers, anything that we've surfaced, and an assessment of what it would take, and then we can take the next step. So that's our proposal. We'd love your feedback on that.
I just have a quick question. So what level do we target this OKR at? For example, is at CEO level or engineering level or development level? And also, I think if we make it to OKR, we also need PMs to line up, have a matching OKR on the PM side. So we are collaborating together, making the steps forward together. Yes,
the intent is to have a joint OKR where we would have that matching. We haven't thought deeply about the correct level. I think it would require at least product management involvement because there are some product questions, and we would have a need for engineers in specific groups who can actually provide the specific assessment for what that means for their domain. But it would be both. It's not a one or the other. This is something that needs to happen in both functions.
So iteration means reducing the scope of something so that you can ship it faster. And the proposal is to not ship something for a quarter. So my question is, can you make it smaller so that we can ship something within the quarter? I might be misinterpreting things.
I think that's a fair concern. I think we have thought about a few things that group pods can ship that we know will be useful regardless of this evaluation in parallel. For example, the cluster metadata decomposition, that would be an option. But I think it is hard given the scope of pods. At least I have no good solution right now to say we're just going to do this, because there are too many unknowns for us to have a good overview over everything. It's a very fundamental change to how GitLab operates.
They're also not mutually exclusive. We would possibly ship decomposition of cluster-wide metadata in parallel to every group in the company figuring out if this isolation, what features it will break for them. But
I think I don't like that, because like cluster-wide metadata decomposition doesn't buy anybody anything.
Agree.
So I don't like, that's not an iteration, because you have to ship something of value to the end user. It's something you can ship, but not something of value to the end user. What worries me is what is in point 4. It's like, hey, can we talk with people how forks will work in data migration? If that's the next body of work that we're going to do, then don't do it.
No, I think that's a misunderstanding. I think the intent of point 4 is to say we will have meetings going forward, this specific CEO sync, and we wanted to understand if when there are more technical topics arise, if you would be interested in us surfacing them to you as well. That's, I think,
I don't think it's
question.
about me. I think the problem is that you are spending time on that while you should be shipping something. You should remove those features from the scope and focus on shipping something that is of value to our end users. So to make it more concrete based on my very little knowledge, and I'm commenting in a Sentinel-1 thread while I'm half listening to you, so we'll see how good I do. But the goal for the quarter, in my opinion, should be we should have a GitLab user on part 2. Part 1 will be everybody else. And that user on part 2 will not be able to access forks or stars or follows or move their data over. No, they started on part 2 and they can't get off. It's the smallest aquarium in the world. But they are on a separate pod, and that means they have their own database. Maybe to set context, we should have 2 users, so we don't get this whole everyone gets their own pod discussion, which doesn't make sense. So we should have 2 users on part 2 with our own infrastructure. And the benefit for the user is they get potentially higher uptime after a while we figure all this pod stuff out. And we cut all the features that we can't make work. So it will be very limited set of features. And we don't talk about forks or data migration or anything else. But we put everything there to try to make sure we get part 2 up and running with these 2 non-paying users on it.
Okay, so your suggestion is to get a second pod up and running in production, at least in some form, and get usage
not in some
that.
form, in production. That's a goal for the quarter, right? You can do it in staging first, please. Please do.
I have to admit, I don't know at the moment if that is something that we could do. I think it's a good challenge. I see the concern about iteration. If we are okay with breaking all of those functionalities, I think that makes it, of course, easier. But that is, I want to be transparent, right? I think we would have to chat with the team and come back and see what we could do.
Great. So OKR is about 70% confidence level. So you don't need to get to 100%, but shouldn't be 10% either.
After doing POC, I think it's probably unrealistic to do it this way.
Great.
But maybe there is some other way to do it. I don't know. But
what can we do?
I guess it's like the main design. The idea was like that users are shared, but I think Sid, in your proposal, you are saying that user explicitly lives on the pod 1 or like pod 2, right?
No, I look the user, for example, like the user login info and metadata and settings, that can be still on part 1. So let me be more explicit. Part 2 in production for GitLab.com with 2 non-paying organizations. The pod should contain what breaks most on GitLab.com?
It's gonna be severely broken because we have so many cross joins between users and other stuff.
I don't know. So there's CI database or Gitly?
It's about the main database. There's a ton of cross join between users and tables in main database.
Okay.
So that's why we propose the composition of the users, because you're kind of gonna break these boundaries, and then what you are proposing, I think, becomes feasible.
Okay.
Because so far we've been hacking in the POC to allow all of the cross joins today to work with the same database but different schemas. But until we have we can access users without main database, and do not have foreign keys between users, and all of the existing tables, like projects table, have owner with via foreign key to user. It's kind of unrealistic to do it. That's why the composition.
So that makes a ton of sense.
We need to break this like cycle basically first.
Camille, you come up with a proposal. So to forget about my proposal, come up with something else. I can live with, I don't know, the user data still living in pod 1 because we didn't have time during the quarter to make their cluster metadata database thing. I can live with that. The things in the proposal that I really didn't like and that I think are against iteration is we don't ship anything. We're getting all the other teams involved and we're spending time figuring out features that some people can live without. Some people are going to be like, look, I just want my own reliable part. I don't care about forking projects. So we should be very ruthless. It's not nice of a word, but very ambitious in reducing features so that we can ship something. But yeah, might be that we can't ship it in the quarter. I look forward to hearing what we can do. But if it involves involving a whole bunch of other people, and if it involves talking about a whole lot of features we can live without, that stuff I don't think is helpful to the company.
So, Sid, like to clarify, do you consider like the strong isolation for the organization that we are proposing is like the correct way to look at this problem or not? Because I think like we are now fundamentally thinking,
Camille, that goes a bit over my head.
Because like we are kind of fundamentally thinking that like for this to happen, like we need to have a barrier and boundaries between access.
Yeah, I don't know. So looking forward to what you come up with as a goal for the quarter.
All right. Oh, Nick, sorry.
Oh yeah, I just had a comment to that. I mean, I agree. Yeah, we should be thinking about what we can ship. It just seemed like with the pods, with the proposal to go right to shipping something with pods, it felt like maybe we're skipping over organizations a bit, because within that statement, it kind of implies that organizations is in a state where we can support splitting that. So I just wonder if something with, dealing with organizations might be more manageable first iteration, but yeah, it's something to take offline and get a proposal for.
Might be. So probably my proposal's wrong. Probably the proposal that was on here, in my opinion, it looks wrong. So let's come up with a proposal that's right. I, for one, am still looking forward to getting rid of that admin screen in GitLab that contains some hardware features and some stuff that should be on the group level or the organization level. So if our quarterly goal is to extinguish that with fire, then I'd be very supportive of that. If that helps the pod group, because I hear you talk a lot about strong isolation in organizations, that'd be super cool. I'd look forward to a proposal.
Okay, so I think what I'm taking from this is we're going to make a proposal that will also entail that a large number of things that are available at GitLab right now and work are not going to work in the first iteration. And I think that's...
The goal is to ship something by the end of the quarter.
I thought the goal was to ship something useful, because if we ship a pod that has less features that nobody wants to use, then that's also not useful.
I will use it, and Camille will use it too, so you get your 2 users. Because Dylan, I believe that pod, it's useful in and of by itself to have something that's more isolated from the rest of GitLab. So
we're at time.
I know I'm bending the words a little bit. Thanks, Kurt. I know I'm bending the meaning a little bit, but the proposal as it was too far from shipping. The proposal as I proposed it is probably not super useful. And Dylan, I agree with the criticism. So come up with something else.
All right, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.